So let's start with the restrictions which are in place on travel to Canada. So in order to protect Canadians from the outbreak, the Government of Canada implemented travel restrictions back in March itself. And as per the recent announcement, those travel restrictions have been extended up to August 31st, 2020. And until further notice, those restrictions say that most foreign nationals cannot travel to Canada, even if they have a valid visitor visa or an electronic travel authorization. And these restrictions primarily aim at stopping non-essential and non-discretionary travel to Canada. So, who can enter Canada? So, in spite of the travel restrictions which are in place right now, there are still a few people who can enter Canada. And as you can see on your screen, a few of the examples or a few of the mentions that we have put up here. So, Canadian citizens, Canadian permanent residents, and protected persons can travel to Canada. And this also includes a foreign national who requires entry for an essential purpose and will be exempt from the currently imposed travel restrictions. So, what are the exemptions to the travel restrictions? Let's talk about some of those. Basically, what the travel restrictions say is that all or any temporary residents who are planning to travel to Canada, they need to demonstrate that they are traveling to Canada for an essential purpose. And what do we mean by essential? Essential basically means that someone who has reasons for traveling to Canada, which are non-discretionary as well as non-optional. So emergency orders made under the Quarantine Act do not permit people to travel to Canada for optional or discretionary purposes. So that would be, say, someone is wanting to travel to Canada for tourism or recreation or any sort of entertainment. So, are there any exemptions to these particular restrictions? Yes, there are. And who are exempt? There are some temporary foreign workers and some students, some approved permanent residents, and potentially some visitors looking to reunite with immediate family members already in Canada. So, these are the people who are or might be exempt given their particular situation, who might be exempt to travel to Canada. However, an important thing to note here is that visitors will need an authorization letter to travel to Canada if family in Canada is not a Canadian or a PR. And students and workers will not require this authorization letter. So, what about the travel restrictions that have been imposed on students and what are the exemptions to this? So, as you all no, not all students will be able to travel to Canada as per the current travel restrictions. So, what do you have to do in order to be exempt to travel? In order to be exempt to travel to Canada, you must be in possession of either a study permit visa, which was issued to you on or before March 18, 2020, or you need to have a port of entry letter of introduction, which indicates that your study permit was approved on or before March 18, 2020. However, either one of these is not the only documentation or proof that you need to share in order to be exempt to travel to Canada. A very important thing to note is that, and which is equally as important as either the study permit or the letter of introduction, is that you must be able to demonstrate that it is essential for you to travel to Canada. So, for example, if you have to be in Canada to attend in person classes, or if you are already in the middle of your program of study and need to return to it, then you might be considered as an exemption. You can demonstrate this by providing a recently dated letter from your designated learning institute, and that explains why you physically need to be in Canada for the fall semester. So, for those of you who might be wondering, what if I have a visa which was issued to me before March 18, but my university or college has declared that they will have online classes till 31st of December 2020 at least? You are not part of this exemption because your reason to travel to Canada is not considered essential in this case. And as mentioned earlier, we will not be providing any travel authorization letters for students. So all you need to travel is your visa or your port of entry letter of introduction and evidence of your essential need to travel. So please keep this in mind. And the documents must be provided to the airline at the time of boarding and to the Canadian Border Security Agency officer once you reach your port of entry in Canada. And failure to do so may result in you being denied boarding of your flight or being forced to return from Canada at your own expense. So please remember the clause about essential travel to Canada. So, talking about processing changes as a result of this entire COVID-19 pandemic. So, we do understand that you are aware of recent changes which have taken place and processing related disruptions or disturbances which have occurred because of the onset of the pandemic. So, what have these changes been and how have they impacted you or how have they impacted the entire study permit processing? So the recently introduced measures address applications that have been submitted in full. And what we're trying to do now is it is our main priority, which says that all visa applications need to be processed in time for the fall 2020 semester. And to do this, we need your help by submitting your application as early as possible and submitting all of the required documents as soon as possible. You would also be aware by now that visa application centers all over India are currently still closed. And this means that we are unable to accept any paper applications. So one of the biggest impacts to this is that your application will only have to be online. And that is the only way we are accepting applications as of now. We are also aware of many service disruptions in addition to VACs being closed. We understand that panel physicians are operating with very limited capacity in certain places and not at all in a few others, which means that you might take longer to get your medical test or exam appointment and complete it. We also know that businesses and schools remain closed. So for a lot of you, it might be a situation where you are still awaiting your results and results from your colleges or your schools, and that's why you are still awaiting for your final transcripts. However, all of that being said, we would like to mention that we will not refuse any applications for non-compliance or failure to submit the requested documents at this time. This means that you do not have to worry about the deadlines specified in the request letter sent to you. So the primary deadlines, what we're talking about in this case, are your medicals and your biometric submission at visa application centers. However, one thing that you need to note is that we will not be able to complete the processing of your application until all required and requested documents have been received. So it is in your favor to submit these documents to us as soon as possible and as soon as you can have access to all the documents that you need to submit for your application. So, however, like I said, we have limitations on the panel physicians' working capacity right now. We have back closures, but there are 3 documents which are not part of these exceptions, and they must be submitted in order for you to first even get started with the application process. So these are your application form. And you do not have an application unless you complete our official IRCC study permit application form. And you have to submit it as which is one of your main documents as part of your application kit. You also have to submit your visa application fee, which includes both your study permit processing fee as well as your biometric fee, and your letter of acceptance, which you have received from your institute in Canada. This is absolutely mandatory for you to submit with your application. One thing to note is that we, of course, cannot physically issue any visas until visa application centers across the country are open because we have no mechanism for a two-way transmission of passports between us and the client and the visa office right now. What we are, however, trying to attempt to do is we are trying to return all passports for any existing paper files which we had received before the whole lockdown situation in India had happened. And we understand that this is an important identity document, so we are uh, doing our best to return these passports to the concerned people. Any documents mailed directly to our offices will be returned to the sender. So if you're trying to send anything to us right now, please do not attempt to send your passport directly to us, and please wait for the visa application centers to reopen. So, as mentioned earlier, we have new temporary processing related changes. And what are these changes? So the recently introduced measures address applications which have not yet received approval as of March 18th. And what are these measures? So we need complete study permit applications and they will be prioritized. So the ones which we already had with us will be prioritized. And this means that the application which contains the forms, the fees, and the application fees, the medicals, the biometrics, the letter of acceptance from the institute, and all the other required supporting documents. If your program of study will qualify you for a postgraduate work permit, which is more commonly known as a PGWP, and part of your course, which will be the fall 2020 semester, has already been moved to an online format because of the pandemic, then the time that you spend on the online portion while outside of Canada will still be counted towards time on your PGWP. However, an important thing to note here is that the online portion must be 50% or less of your entire program of study. This means you will still need to complete a minimum half of your program in Canada for all of that time to count towards your PGWP.